To every kid who ever got picked last in gym class.
This is for you.
To every kid who never had a date to no school dance.
This is for you.
To everyone who's ever been called a freak. This is for you. Here we go. Yeah. What? Come on. Yeah. What? Come on. Here we go.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Firefighter Podcast. I'm Isaacpoteet. Today with me, I have Captain Scot Smith. He is our captain here at this local fire station. Of course, I have permission from my chief to let know the name. So we work for Country Corner Fire Station, and it is out of Sperry, Oklahoma. Our main district for fire response is going to be Osage County. However, for EMS district, we do cover Tulsa County and Sperry, the town of Sperry. And we also cover the Osage County area as well in our fire ground. So, Scott, how many square miles do you think we cover?
I think it's a little over 19 square miles.
19 square miles, okay. So we do about 19 square miles, and that's quite a lot. I mean, if you really think about it, that's a lot of coverage. Is that just fire, or is that medical too?
That's just our fire district.
Okay.
We are contracted with Sperry to cover parts of Tulsa County.
Yep.
And I don't really know how many more miles that adds.
I think Randall said something around 50 to 55 square miles total for EMS and fire coverage.
Yeah, because they have a lot of unincorporated area that we also cover.
Absolutely.
So
we are a brand new baby podcast. We are firefighters and EMS people. I am an EMT basic. Scot Smith here is our captain and an EMT basic himself. He has worked the truck for many years on the ambulance, and I've worked the truck 3 years. So we're going to go ahead and get into today's podcast. Today's topic is going to be over firefighter retention, volunteer specifically. Scott, let's talk about time commitment and balancing life. What does the time commitment look like to you for the fire service?
well, time is the first real obstacle you run into.
Yeah.
Because volunteerism is down across the country, and not just with firefighters, with any organization. So to say work-life balance is a real misnomer, in my opinion. It is really hard to find any kind of balance. And that's one of our first challenges, is because I can't guarantee you won't be reading a story to your daughter and the tones go off.
Absolutely.
First call I ever ran on, that's exactly what I was doing 20 years ago.
20 years
I was reading a bedtime story to my daughter, the tone sounded, and out the door I went. It could be in the middle of the night.
Now, was she upset?
Not really. She was not happy about it, but my kids were a little excited about it. They enjoy the firefighter thing. They know that I enjoy it, and it's important to me.
How about the wife?
The wife has gone up and down. It is a very big inconvenience, but I can tell you this, that without a supportive family and a supporting and loving wife, you can't do this. If they're not in support of it, this is not something you can do.
So what about somebody who's single?
Someone who's single, that's our dream come true, because the amount of commitments, as long as he's willing to be serious and committed to what we're doing. The time that you have to dedicate to training and the hours that you have to put in is sometimes challenging for a lot of people, because you don't have to be at every call. To be a good volunteer fireman, you don't have to be at every call, but you need to be at every training.
Yeah. And that could be once a week?
If at all possible. For us, it's every other week, but I do supplemental trainings on that same night every week. Yeah. So that it will make up for those who missed. And we have made allowances in the past for guys who had various schedules. Someone worked nights, someone works weekends, because that also works to our advantage. One of the major downfalls of volunteer fire departments all over the state, well, all over the country, most people have a 9-to-5 job, and that leaves a lot of areas uncovered during the day. And 80% of the nation is covered with volunteer firemen. So, I mean, that's a really stark number, and most people don't realize or appreciate that. That not only are we covered by volunteers, 80% of the country during the day, 9 to 5, are shorthanded.
Are you aware of the number, percentage-wise, that we are volunteer currently in the nation?
In the nation, it's 80%.
80%?
It's running at 80%, and it's real close to that percentage in the state and nationwide.
Nationwide, we're running about 86.2% was the latest numbers, and that was checked just last week.
Right.
For especially our county. I mean, I can look back on Black Dog Fire as a volunteer station, Rock Fire as a volunteer station, Osage County Fire Station, or Osage Fire is a volunteer station. Avant Fire is a volunteer station. Country Corner is a volunteer station. Sperry is a volunteer station. Really, the only paid departments that are near us that have a full-time staff is going to be Limestone, Skytook. We have a paid ambulance department that's here, but that doesn't mean they can just break off and go to fire.
Well, I can help you out with that even more. Most of them are attached to large municipalities who have a large enough tax base from income tax, or not from income tax, from sales tax, to be able to afford a fire department. Most of your smaller towns and most of your smaller communities won't be able to make enough revenue to be able to pay full-time firefighters. You know,
100%, we do well enough just affording gear.
Right. For us as a Title 19, we get property tax. There is no sales tax in it. And so we're kind of limited by how many people who live in our district and how much property there is. So the property is going to stay the same, but it might get subdivided and more houses built, and it will grow, but it's a very slow process.
Absolutely.
So it leaves districts like that really far behind as it develops. They're always playing catch up, just like we are now.
And on that topic, just reversing a little bit here, and we're talking about issues in the fire service. Let's touch back on home real quick. Reality is, being a single firefighter that doesn't have any kids, doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't have a wife, maybe a girlfriend, right? Because you're able to respond better, do things like that. And that's if your job's not so demanding, you're working 60 hours a week and it's taken out of you. Maybe you're not staying up playing video games all night, those kinds of things. But in an ideal world, you have a family, and most people will, if I do have a wife and I do have 2 or 3 kids, so that's going to be a lot harder for me to be a firefighter, depending on what your support structure is.
Well, we're competing with practices, probably church activities, maybe school activities. We're competing with whatever is important to that family as a whole. And so it's a real hard sell. We won't tell someone, hey, you're going to have to miss your kid's game. We wouldn't tell them that any more than we tell them you have to miss work for your full-time job.
Yeah.
It's critical, it's important. It's part of the reason why you're the kind of person who wants to be here. So that time is really our first obstacle as a volunteer firefighter. But touching on your comment about being single, one of our number one selling points, and one of the things we've come to accept, is we get a lot of people that come in who want to be a full-time firefighter or career firefighter somewhere else.
Using that stepping stone.
And we become a stepping stone. And I've heard the complaints from other chiefs about how we become a revolving door training firefighters to go on to full-time services. But it's kind of something we have had to accept. And most volunteer fire departments who have higher standards, who do run an academy or send their people to an academy, do want them to get EMT license. We have got to the point where we've accepted that we are a training ground for full-time firefighters in other areas around us anyway.
Accepting it's one thing, but is that really a bad thing? I mean, do you want to hold that volunteer firefighter down forever? And let's say they're doing this because, for me, right, I didn't think being a full-time paid firefighter was an option. I didn't know that until I got into volunteering, and I didn't even know volunteering was a thing. I found out on the radio that volunteering was a thing. I got in, had a house fire, first month with 0 experience, got bit by the fire bug, and said, I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. You'd be amazed at how often that actually happens. I can think of 6 people we've had with this department just in the last several years. Weren't sure if this was where they wanted to go, and all 6 of those people are either working for fire EMS as their full-time job now. And that's just in recent years. The 20 years I've been here, there's actually more. but working for major municipalities around us right now. And that's one of the things that big fire departments love, the fact that you've already seen it, you've already had a taste of it, and yes, you like it, and this is something you think you can do, as opposed to coming through their academy, getting in the field and finding out, wait a minute, this is not for me. You know, so it really, it's a huge investment to train a firefighter, either whether you're a volunteer fire department or whether you're a full-time fire department. So anytime you can hedge your bets, that's a good thing. So because we can use it as a selling point, kind of touching back on your point, it is something that we embrace.
Absolutely.
And we will not hold back a firefighter if they have an opportunity. I shouldn't say he.
Yeah.
If they have an opportunity to become a full-time firefighter somewhere, you know, we're going to encourage that. Just pass the word and let people know.
I can say, from my personal experience, we've put one on, Jacob Sutherland, which, of course, before I post this, I'll make sure he's cool with me putting his name out there, although we are live. But he's now a Tulsa fireman because he started here. And he went through the training process or the application process, got hired with Tulsa. You know, I didn't think Tulsa, for me, Tulsa's the biggest, baddest company out there when it comes to fire groups all around our area. And I thought, I'm not good enough to be there. And someone's like, just try it. So I'm like, okay, fine. Put in the application. I still don't know if I'm going to be excellent at it, but I don't have to quit me. I'm going to try it. And so I reached out to him, being a full-time firefighter, saying, hey man, what are some tips that I can use to try to, you know, not schmooze my way through Tulsa, but like make myself look better. And he's like, well, for one, you're going to want to list your experience as a volunteer firefighter because that looks really good to them.
Absolutely. You know, my son-in-law came through here, and my daughter was here with him, and they were both recruited by Tulsa Fire. They were both being talked to, saying, listen, this is something we like, this is something that's good, and if you want, this is an option for you. I think that sometimes with the women, people don't understand the value, or that's an option for the women who want to become firefighters. Come out and volunteer with us. You know, there is an appetite for female firefighters in these municipalities as well as the volunteer fire departments, because they do a good job, and there are some cases where it just makes more sense for us to have a woman involved.
I absolutely respect women in the fire service. One, there's been some out there that will kick the dog crap out of the guy. They work harder, and I don't think it has anything to do with they have anything to prove. I think it has to do with they have a heart and mindset to want to do better, and so they're going to haul hose. They're going to charged or uncharged. They're going to have a larger care aspect for a patient. You know, they listen better. That's one thing. You know, chief saying, "Hey, I need this." They're like on it. You know, I haven't seen a female firefighter in the service today that I'm just like, they don't need to be here. Every single female firefighter that I've seen in the service, I'm like, heck yeah, they deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just one of the many tools, you know, being able to go to a full-time service, you know. And another important thing, and people don't understand this, you know, there's something for everyone in the fire service. We have to have the attic monkeys. We have to have the heavy guys that go through the doors. We need people with more technical aspects. Even the computers, there are aspects of the fire service that covers a lot of different ranges. You know, the really great athletes, yeah, there's always a great use for them. There's a lot of things that they can do. But there's such a wide variety of skill sets that are used in the fire service that people don't realize just how valuable their skills may be.
I guess I can use my own experience in this. I'm an aircraft mechanic, been doing aircraft maintenance for 13 years. You work for a heavy diesel mechanic. I don't want to put their company out there.
Heavy equipment company.
Heavy equipment, sorry. But you're a mechanic for them. And we bring maintenance to this field going, hey, we can fix our apparatuses, we can fix our equipment. You know, we have the ability to look at air packs and realize a leak problem, or the threads on the screws that are marred up, or, you know, pumps not working right.
Well, it's a mechanical aptitude.
Yeah.
Because we also have lots of tools that we use. You know, people talk about the jaws of life, the spreaders, and shredders, the spreaders, and the shears. Understanding the chainsaw and the K12. There's a mechanical aspect to a lot of what this is, but not everyone has to have that. But you have those who do, and so you need the tunnel rats just like you need the mechanical aptitude as well as the medics. So people bring their skill set, and we can use them. We can put them to work.
I love tree guys. I love construction guys. Anybody who has this like they may not look look like they they're bigger dudes, right? But they got stamina like no other, and it's because they're out there in the heat 10, 12, sometimes 16 hours a day digging trenches.
Right.
And those are the kind of people you want that to put on an air pack and burn up 30 minutes and switch out and say I'm ready to go again.
Another thing about when we're just talking about retention, people misunderstand the brotherhood and camaraderie you get with a group of firefighters. Our medics and our firefighters. I get really attached. It is our second family. We become bonded to one another, and that mentorship. And I'll probably say this again. Mentorship is one of the most underused resources in America today. More people need to be mentors, and more people need to have mentors.
And it's kind of why I started this podcast in the first place. Was it's called Tales from the Tailboard, because what did the old salt used to do? When I say salt, I mean people like you, people like Gary, people who have been doing this for years and years and years and years. You guys have the information, and it's up to us to get that information from you guys, so that we can use it in our generation and keep that moving forward. And sadly and beneficially, in this day's generation, these kids have phones in their hands or tablets in their hands. So, if I can get this information out here and put it in their hands that they're already on anyway, and they scroll past us, they're going, oh, what's this? I didn't know 85% of the nation's firefighters are volunteers. That's exactly what I did. But I grew up with an older dad, and so, I listened to talk radio. And I found out listening to Sean Hannity during a commercial break about volunteer firefighters, and that's how I went, what the heck's a volunteer firefighter? I thought it was all career stuff, and that's how I got into it. So, listening to the radio, listening to information, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So it's funny you say being mentors. Well, let's mentor those that need to be mentored.
Right. I'm gonna steal a phrase. I was at a horsemanship clinic with Buck Brenneman. And so I'm going to give him credit for this. But he says, the cool thing about what he's doing is he's giving us his years of experience and educating us. And the cool thing is that Tom Dorrance and guys that he learned from gave him their 50, 60 years of experience. And so exponentially, he's giving us the experience of 3 generations of horsemen on how to do what we want to do as far as taking care of our horsemen. Well, the guys that we learned from, that we listened to and taught us, we take those tools with us and then we pass them on. And my chief and I have a phrase that we use, we have trained the guys that are training the guys that are going to take our place. And this is something that never ends. It's a constant evolution. As technology changes, we have to keep training and keep learning. But it's a constant mentorship to take what we've learned and the experience we have to pass it along, but still bring in any new sciences and new techniques that come along, new equipment. So it's a balance between those two.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the excitement of that and the learning intimidates some people, but a lot of new guys, once they get in here and start figuring this out, it excites them and it will keep them hooked.
Oh, yeah. How often have you learned something new and went, I need to tell these guys about this?
Very frequently.
Yeah.
When you're looking for something to teach, as I do so often, it is amazing to me how often I stumble across something. It may be really complicated or it may be incredibly simple, but why haven't we been doing that?
Exactly.
Why aren't we teaching that? And so we do. We incorporate it into what we're doing.
And to play a devil's advocate, but also opposition at the same time here, how much information do you consume that you really have to use your own experience and say, no, that's not right.
Well, in the fire service, one of the things that everyone has to understand when they get into this is every scene is different. No matter how much you trained for a scenario, it is never going to be that exact scenario.
100%.
So there has to be some that adapt and overcome in all of us. We have to be able to develop a plan, look at it, and that plan has to evolve based on the information we're getting.
Yeah.
So it's immediate. It's immediate. You have to say, okay, wait, no. These guys are telling me here, the heat source is coming here, the wind's blowing there, we're going to have to change this up. You know, we have to adjust according to the information we're getting.
Yes, especially whether it's coming from dispatch, whether it's coming from witnesses on scene, or anything. I mean, the dispatch notes could say, the fire's on the second floor, but you get there and it's smoke rolling out of the second floor, fire's on the first floor.
Right.
You know, so it's ever evolving.
And on medical calls as well, as you well know. You know,
I learned that firsthand.
I can't tell you how many times that the dispatch was only a mere suggestion of what I actually found.
100%. And I would say even this. So I was involved in witnessing a concrete truck T-bone an F-150. The driver of the F-150 died instantly. It's news that you can find online, but it was a 71-year-old man. He came out from an intersection onto the highway, and the concrete truck was attempting to slow down, unsure of what this driver was going to do. But when he made his choice, there was nothing that concrete truck could have done.
Yeah.
So I was on my motorcycle behind them about a football field away, 100 yards, and I watched the concrete truck plow into him. And I stopped to the point where I threw my bag off, ran up to the driver, saw, there's no saving him, he's gone. I went and ran to the concrete driver. Hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. He pulled out in front of me. Okay, call 911, get them here. All right, that's what he was already doing that, right? So why I say that is because our dispatch notes from what we see in reality. And I will say 100% witnessing something like that is completely different than getting dispatch notes, getting something tangible to hold on to, and then you're responding and you have 5-10 minutes, depending on where you're responding from, to look at your notes and have a plan of action. Okay, hey, we had a concrete truck, plow into a F-150. Most likely there's going to be intrusion on the driver's side. We're going to have to use jaws alive, get him out. We don't know if he's alive or dead at this point, whatever the effect may be. But while on scene, I'm telling my story to the cop. The driver's telling his story to the cop. He also had a trainee with him, and that trainee's telling his side of the story to the cop. That cop's relaying everything over to dispatch, to radio, and it's like they're getting pieces and pieces and pieces of information that they're all trying to piece together, and then that comes to us, as firefighters, and we get that toned out, and we get these call notes, and it's like, no wonder our call notes are sometimes all over the place. As firefighters, and we get that toned out, and we get these call notes, and it's like, no wonder our call notes are sometimes all over the place.
Right.
Because of the massive amount of information that dispatch has to jumble together to give you this small paragraph of, hey, what you're responding to.
Right. And I tell you, from my aspect, and I've pulled up on accidents, seen them happen, and my thought process as a firefighter has changed dramatically as it's evolved, because I'm automatically thinking, what resources do we need? Do we need to stop traffic? How many medics do we need? Do we need fire? How many cops do we need? Where are the inlets and outlets? What are the danger zones here? As the process, those are things you can learn, but sometimes it's really easy to get tunnel vision in that situation and just focus on one thing.
It's funny you say that too, on that note, because, and I keep saying it's funny you say that because you're hitting on a bunch of topics in just one realm that's enormous to piecing together information. What'd you say when you said, I immediately go to, do we need to stop traffic? Do we need to do this? I'm on a motorcycle. I'm not stopping traffic. However, did I think about that when I hopped off my bike other than being in the center lane? I pulled off the traffic. I'm not in the road.
Right.
Cool, right? I sort of eliminated myself from any danger, but as I'm checking on the driver of the F-150 there and back, these drivers coming up the hill have no clue what just happened because they weren't there when it happened. They're flying by, and now they're launching plastic pieces at me and my bike and everything else.
Right.
And I'm going, stop!
So now the hazard, the accident has happened.
Yeah.
But now new hazards are coming into the accident zone. And those are things that, when I pull up to a scene like that, even if it's out away from our district, and I'm just, Scot Smith pulling up, and I look at those things. I've had that happen coming through Tulsa, where I see an accident happen, and my first thing is I grab my reflective, because I always carry it with me, and I try to make sure everyone's somewhere safe, if possible, and then we check things out. What resources do we need? Where are the danger zones? And as you evolve in the fire service, those will start coming to you more and more.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I just thought, going up there, I was like, I need to see if he's okay.
Right.
It's immediate. Only thing that was running through my head was, is he okay? But I wasn't worried about safety. I wasn't worried about my own safety, honestly, until after the math, I realized, I parked on the way over there.
And that's the typical tunnel vision that we have to train guys like you to look beyond and to see the big picture. And that's one of the things that someone will learn if they're with us, to look at that big picture and to see the safety zones. Where do I need to put my apparatus or my motorcycle or whatever to make sure it doesn't cause an additional hazard? Where do I need to be so now I'm not an additional hazard? Can we get these people away from this so they're not a hazard? If at all possible, get them away from where immediate danger is. That process, is all part of, what we do. And we'll touch on that when we talk more about training.
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about commitment and balancing life and what it takes to be a volunteer firefighter. Let's talk about financial strain and lack of compensation. Obviously, volunteering, you're not going to make any money volunteering. I kind of talked in my solo episode about getting a stipend, sometimes, $3-4 a call, but that's not everywhere. It's definitely not here,
right.
At least on the volunteer or fire side.
Right. Well, I was in on the conversation that we had many years ago. I've got 20 years in here. So first year in, the topic came up again as to whether or not we wanted to get $5 a call or something to make up for some of our fuel. And we were unanimous that we were just going to stick with zero. And I can say that some of the things I'm proudest of in my life that I've done has been for free.
Oh yeah.
I've coached, I've been a member of charitable organizations, I run a charitable operation. I also have been a board member for various different youth organizations. Didn't get paid a dime for them, and as proud as I am of my jobs I've done, those things, if they list nothing but the things I did for free that I'm proud of, it would fill my headstone and I would be completely content with that. So, we are not a paid firefighter, or we're not a paid fire department, but we also as volunteers don't get the stipend, but most of us are pretty okay with that. Now, a lot of departments will give you a small stipend or an hourly wage when you're on a call, and that's just one of those variations from district to district. And it's hard to get people to come out for free, but I've always felt it's almost an insult to offer them pennies on the dollar for their time. So that being said, we've just stuck with you're just strictly a volunteer, 100%. Now obviously our medics are paid because they have a full-time staff and a full-time schedule. So we have our medics on our ambulance that are paid, and so we come in and we may help with that, and we first respond for those guys. But as far as financial compensation, our state used to give us a tax break on being firefighters, and they have made that more and more difficult. I'd like to see our legislators come up with more protections, as well as more ways that we can save money. There's a lot of opportunities out there. At one time, they were talking about hunting licenses and fishing licenses for free for volunteer firefighters. They were talking about a tax break. There's been talk of protections, much like the National Guard, you know, anything they could do for us to help us hold and retain, kind of touching back on that former subject, anything that we can get to offer a volunteer to make it easier for them to justify being here is certainly going to be valuable to us. Mm-hmm. But go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. We'll talk more on this is talking about strain and lack of compensation. But as for somebody that might be tuning in, they're probably going, well, why would I want to volunteer then? I mean, for that sounds like a lot of negative. There's a lot of training that if you do want to do this to eventually use that stepping stone to go into full-time paid firefighter, they're going to want experience. They're going to want to see that you put in some work, put in some skin in the game, and that involves getting your firefighter 1, hazmat awareness, hazmat ops, ropes courses, EMTs, things like that, and that costs money. And our station and a lot of volunteer stations in contrast with Oklahoma State University Fire Service Training, OSU FST, they'll send you to outside training so you can do grain bin rescue and you can do ropes training and you can do hazmat awareness and firefighter 1, and all that's paid for.
Yes, we do pay for a lot of training. We've helped with EMT training. We've helped with paramedic training. I don't know how many classes of firefighter 1 that we have paid for, subsidized through our department, and it's a critical stepping stone. And that's the same firefighter 1 that you need for IFSAC certification for any place in the state, and it's nationwide. It's recognized. So, as far as that goes, that's a certificate you can take with you anywhere you go.
Oh yeah, and in my experience, I'm applying for Tulsa Fire currently, and when I do get accepted, if I get accepted, I'm going to say when I get accepted because that's my mindset. When I do, I'm going to pass CPAT training, go to cadet school after I pass the interviews, and part of that is I'm going to have to retake Fire 1 and also get Fire 2 and retake my hazmat ops. So why would I retrain why would I go out to outside training and join for Fire 1 if I'm going to have to redo it anyway if I want to be a full-time guy?
Well, here's how I look at it, and I can tell you from, I won't say firsthand experience, but my son-in-law came through here and went over to Tulsa Fire, like you're wanting to do, and it was so much easier after he had went through these courses and done this for us for a while, and then when he went there, he was able to review and polish up on what Tulsa wanted him to know, and was able to use the tools he'd gotten here. It just put him that much further ahead, and it made it a lot easier for him to shine and to be ahead of the curve. And I think any of those people who were in that academy, probably if they had the experience or had someone mentoring them in the fire service, were just that much more prepared to shine while they were in that academy.
Yeah. So having the experience going in makes it a whole lot easier when it's time to put your big boy pants on and do it for real and be paid to do it. Compared to someone who goes, hey, I'm going to apply for this. I've never done it before, but I think it's fun. And then, those people are very needed as well because being that they have no experience, they can be molded into a certain way. But also, if you filled your fire station with people who know nothing, it'd be a lot harder. So you got to have a mix, right? Yeah. You bring on people who have been doing it for a while, and bring on some people who don't know anything.
I can tell you, I've got a retired chief, district chief, and a retired captain in my family, and I can tell you numerous stories that they've told me of people who've gone through the academy, shined, looked absolutely brilliant, and when they got on the job, they had that call that they decided they were done. Whether it be dirty, nasty, strenuous, or just emotional for them, that they weren't going to stay. And so that's why sometimes your volunteer departments are kind of a testing ground or a proving ground to make sure you're really cut out for this without making that huge investment in changing your lifestyle.
And that's something you bring that up, especially on the training grounds, right? When you go to cadet class, Southern guy was saying about earlier, which you know him well. He was like, they're really not going to fire you in cadet school. That's really up to you. They're probably going to get in your head and say you should probably just go home, pack your stuff, go home, kind of like they would if they were in the military. Like, you're not meant for this. You can't do it, especially if you're slow or, can't keep up with PT. But ultimately, that choice is yours. And he said, you'd be surprised when we start the class with 90 cadets and we end the class 6 months later with 20 people.
The mental toughness and understanding what you're getting into, I think, is a real challenge. I've never been through a Tulsa Academy, so I can't tell you how that works. But I can tell you, I have been tested as a firefighter, and I have been moved emotionally, both very, very deeply. I've had hard losses that we have seen and experienced, and I've had extreme joy. We've won battles and we've lost battles, and it's an emotional roller coaster, and it can test you. And with Tulsa, well, any major municipality, any major city, you're going to have all those experiences turned up. The volume's going to be up because the frequency is going to be a lot higher. Excuse me. You're going to see more of those calls. The volume is just going to be tremendous compared to a rural department like we have out here. So, if you're sensitive to that, if you can't put it in a box or have that sounding board with someone to talk to or what have you, then you may not be able to deal with that.
But that's where the volunteer fire department comes into play, because this is your family. And I can't tell you how many times after a tough call where we've ran a medical call, get there, the guy's 4-lead A system. And after the call, especially after my first dead body, I found, I didn't find, but we stumbled across going into the house. On the drive back, it was 2 guys, and I still remember to this day. Poteet, you good? Yeah, I'm good. Sure? You need to talk about it? I was like, yeah, I'm good. I mean, I think it'd be a little bit different if we worked him and we lost him, but, we walked in and he was already gone.
Yeah.
So,
my youngest daughter, when she volunteered here, it was an interesting phenomenon. We actually did mutual aid for our neighboring department, and those guys knew us, and then our guys knew us. And she said, the next day we were talking about it, doing a debrief, and she said, I'll bet there were 15 people that just walked up to me one-on-one and said, are you okay? Are you all right with this? You need to talk. And so, she dealt with it. She's a nurse now. So it was this was a stepping stone for both my daughters to go into nursing, actually, the medical side of it. So that is just one more reason why coming in here and looking at the medical side as well as the fire side can end up bearing fruit that you didn't expect.
absolutely.
But she said, boy, it was amazing how many people really just stopped and took the time to ask me how I was doing and if I was okay. And you can learn that here. Find out if you're for that before making that big investment of turning your whole career into, I'm gambling on whether or not I can do this. Come out and find out if you like it or not.
I can say that, and then going to EMT class, doing clinicals is real important because class teaches you one thing, doing it in person is completely different. We had a guy in our class, and just like cadet school, you start with so many and you end with so many. Some people go, I don't know if I'm up for this, and they quit, and that's okay. And then you have people that go to clinicals and they've made it all this way to the very, very end. They finally get to clinicals. They get a shots fired call, get a guy riddled with bullets, and next minute they're mopping out the ambulance that's soaked in blood. And this guy went, this is not for me.
Well, and that's an important key. It's not for everybody. My son came to me and I'd asked him if he wanted to be on. And, we drove up on a car wreck and he did really well. And I thought, wow, this kid's I'm going to be able to bring him out and do this. And he looked at me the next day when we was talking about it. I said, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. And I was like, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it.
Nothing wrong with that.
This isn't for everyone. This is something that you kind of have to have a calling to. And so if this isn't for you, then that's fine. I'm going to support you in whatever you do.
Yeah.
But this is an option, and if this is not one you want, that's fine. It's not for everybody.
I had no clue that 3 members of my family members were volunteer firefighters growing up until after I had gotten into the service. And they said, oh yeah, I used to be a volunteer firefighter years back. And I went, no one told me anything. My uncle and my brother used to be volunteer firefighters, and I think maybe that's a good reason they didn't say anything when I was that young. Maybe it would have scared me away from being a volunteer firefighter or a firefighter in general?
Well, most of us aren't in it for the accolades or the pats on the back.
Yeah.
Because if you were, you'd find a much more public venue to show off your skills. But I believe we make a big difference in our communities. I believe that I could have went to a full-time fire department years ago. I had opportunities to do so. And whether it be fear of failure or just short-sightedness, you know, I chose a career that I thought would pay more. And maybe it has, paid dividends. But it led me to a situation where I've been able to provide a firefighter and a medic in this rural area, and for 20 years. And I think that in the long run, this community was well served, and I feel like I got more out of it. Long term, fed my soul, if you will. I feel very proud of what I've done here.
Oh yeah.
So
as you should, because you have 20 plus years experience, and I gotta ask this just because I don't know the answer to it, and I'd be happy to either yes or no on this one. Have you ever made a grab in your 20 years?
No, I really haven't. I've been in situations where we've saved pets, where we've saved things, but fortunately for me, I haven't had to go into too many fires where there have been people in there.
Good.
Unfortunately for me, we have made a couple recoveries, and that, on the other hand, is a very stark contrast. We all want to make that grab. We all want that, and that's a series of coincidences that have to happen to be there to do that. But I'm much more thankful that most of the people that I have had to run on, or fires I've run on, did not have people in there.
Good.
I'm very thankful for that, because I would a lot rather than be outside upset about losing their home than to be looking for them in the smoke and in the fire. So,
well, Scott, we're going to take a quick break real quick. I'm going to get this to the sponsor real quick, and then... What's up, guys? First off, I'd like to thank you for spending your time listening to this podcast. I'd like to take a minute and introduce the sponsor of this podcast, Red Clover Coffee, a veteran-owned company that single sources great coffee at a great price. They sell ground, whole bean, and single pod coffee options, and when you purchase their coffee or merchandise like a hat or cup to go with it, know that a % of proceeds go back to charities and helping communities in need. If you're not drinking Red Clover Coffee, you're missing out. Treat yourself to a bag today. And now, back to the show. Moving on to community support and engagement, we talked about EMS Week, Fire Prevention Week. Can we touch on what do we do for Fire Prevention Week?
well, this year we're going to try to have a poster contest at our local school, and what we're wanting to do is we have 3 fire departments for this school district, and what we're wanting to do is put together a ride to school in a fire truck for 3 of the winners.
That's cool.
And they will pull up to the front of the school and come out of the truck, and all their buddies will be there to see them. And it's more about seeing us in that positive light and understanding, and also just reminding people, that we're here, we're relevant, and that you might not see us for days, weeks, or months, but you need us. So that's one of our things. And we do fundraisers. We do help with other fundraisers, and we oftentimes try to be seen in various community events. We go to football games. They'll have a pancake breakfast out here or a dinner. And a lot of people in the community will actually utilize our facility for their events, and we get to make appearances and see people. So we try to use any excuse we can to be in the public eye, because it's really easy to forget your fire and EMS people, and then all of a sudden you need them. It's an easy thing to overlook. Your daily life doesn't usually involve your firefighters or your medics.
Yeah, very true. Unless you got one living with you, you don't always have them with you. And to touch on that, when people call 911, and I think this is back here a little bit, but something when you're a volunteer or even a full-time guy, people need to understand is even if you don't agree with a call, say that, somebody calls in and they're complaining of hip pain or something, right? Or just something random, right?
My blood pressure's a little too high.
Right. To you, you're like, what a BS call, right? And you're running that call, whatever, right? But what you really need to have the mindset for is when they call 911, they're having a pretty bad day. And sometimes what could be the worst day of their life, not your worst day as a firefighter, their worst day.
That's an important mindset, and I have to remind all our guys, our rookies, is what you're considering another call could be their worst day of their life. And I mean, I don't know if you heard that from me, but I know that we repeat that often.
Well, good leaders say it. I say it a lot. And I've heard it from more than just you, but you have said it, yes.
It's important to understand that. And another problem, that you see is, guys get complacent. They might make jokes or whatever. But, and you know this from being on the truck, what is paged out is not always what you find when you get there. And sometimes it is much more serious, or sometimes it's not even a medical issue as much as an emotional issue. Someone could be in a situation at home where maybe they're battered or emotionally scarred, or someone who's really lonely, or someone who is in a position where they don't remember to take their meds, and they're not really supposed to be by themselves. So sometimes what a call starts out as is not what it evolves into as you go into it. So you have to be open-minded but prepared. Look at what's around you, look at the clues, find out what's going on, and go from there. You treat the symptoms, it's the same thing as as a medic, you treat the symptoms. So you kind of got to do a triage of what is and what isn't important, and try to get in there and find out what's really at the heart of why the call happened.
Very true.
Sometimes it's not what you get paged out for that you're the most useful for.
Very true. I mean, I can tell you, like what we had mentioned earlier about women being in the service, right? That let's say that it is a domestic call and she got battered, or it could be the man got battered, but in this scenario, we'll just say the female, right? If you're on a BLS truck or a medic truck, or maybe it's EMTB and paramedic, and you have a female with you, it's a lot easier to have a female talk to the lady, because if she did get battered by a man, the last person she's going to want to talk to is a man.
Well, in so many cases, if a woman's involved in a trauma of any kind, sometimes she's fine with a man, sometimes she is more comfortable with a woman, and that is something that we like to accommodate if we can. It's not an absolute, but we certainly like to try to help make them feel as comfortable as possible, because that's one of our goals when we have a patient. Is to make them feel as comfortable as possible, make them feel safe, and to take care of their needs, whatever they may be at that time.
Let's talk about improved communication and technology. So we kind of briefly touched on that with you're always learning, so you're always, even though you've got 20 years of salt on you, you still bring that to the group, but you're also relearning stuff. But then, what is the technology from SCBAs to Jaws Alive to using airbags to stabilize vehicles and blocks and things like that? What is that technology? How's that advanced from then 20 years ago to now?
Well, I mean, in all the tools that we still have, they're just getting better. They're working faster, they're lasting longer, they're getting stronger, and in many cases the training has changed and varied. And as people have these tools, techniques on how to use these tools vary, and people have breakthroughs all the time on different things we can do with them, different lifts, different cuts, different things of that nature. Blocking has changed a lot. I mean, we were very slowly evolving. We started out just cutting 2x4s and 4x4s and other blocks and nailed them together.
We still use those.
We still use those today, and they're still very useful. But departments now are going to the composites that are lighter weight and stronger and last longer. And so it's a huge leap. And then that's like whenever I first started, I'd never seen inflatable bags. And after so many years, here, we finally got inflatable bags here. And I thought, wow, this is a game changer. Well, they'd already been in other places, but it finally filtered to us. Yeah. SCBAs, whenever I started here, we were just doing away with the elephant trunks. We were just getting rid of the elephant trunk. So
I've seen those in a couple different old photos. They are so old that you only see them in photographs.
Right. So I was lucky that I really didn't have very much of that.
Yeah.
The cool thing was you could tuck them in your jacket and it would filter some of it if you ran out of air. But it's not a place you want to be.
No.
But as far as
what about before that? We talk about the primitive technology. What did the guys with the beards used to do?
I've watched the movie Backdraft.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can mention that in here or not, but you watch some of that where they're still doing some holdover stuff, where they have a long coat and the tall boots.
Yeah.
The PPE has evolved so much, and the understanding of the toxins that we're breathing has advanced so much that the idea of going into a burning building without breathing air, from your mask and from your cylinder, is just ludicrous now.
I mean, these guys, like I'm talking about, like the old Irish firefighters, like where firefighting started at, right?
Oh yeah.
They would take their beards that are this big, dip them in water, stuff them in their mouths, and breathe through that because the water molecules would trap the carcinogens from black smoke.
Well, it's just like, I don't know if you have ever had to use, but in our wildland, we have the whiffs, and the aloe vera in the beads. You put it over your face with the mask, and the particles will stick to the aloe vera, and you're sucking the air through there. It's a really simple concept. And
I don't like going into a fire without it, honestly.
Well, they're super handy. Your eyes are very sensitive to smoke. Obviously, your body's very sensitive to smoke. Lots of carcinogens, lots of things that will hurt you, if not just knock you out or even kill you. Most people in fires die from smoke inhalation, not necessarily burning.
Yeah, I mean, we were out on a fire at Ranchland Road, and we were back burning, but then we were securing jumps as well. So they would jump over, and I mean, he was like, "Hey, we got to jump up there." We move up 200 feet. I get out, stretch the hose out, we're putting it out. All of a sudden, the wind shifts on us, and now I'm just full on smoke and embers. And to recover from something like that, I'm supposed to be attentive and ready to go, and now I'm going.
Spin it around and find a place to guard yourself so that you can wipe your eyes and clear your throat.
I was trying to wear goggles and it still didn't help.
Goggles are very little help. There's very little you can do for your eyes in a wildland fire, because ultimately, if you're not vented, it's going to fog up.
I almost want to wear a scuba mask.
And so a full mask with a screw-on filter is really the best situation. Yeah. And we've actually talked about doing that here. But there's a limit to what you can do. Mostly we try to just use the wind to our advantage. That's really our best tool in a wildland fire. But the simple truth of it is that technology has been a blessing to the fire service. And I am one that I say firmly embrace it. I absolutely want to keep my firefighters as safe as possible. And the only place I draw the line is European helmets.
European helmets, yeah. That's been a topic for years.
Yeah. I'm sure eventually a lot of departments will go to it. I know some that have.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready for that yet. I think it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
Cowboy hat keeps the rain and sun off of you.
Yeah.
And then our helmets keep the falling debris off of us.
I think the Euro helmet's basically just like a glorified motorcycle helmet.
It is just like a motorcycle helmet. And so the way it ties into your gear, it's great. It looks like it'd be a wonderful deal. But I like having that crown around that sheds the water and debris off the sides. So I'm going to be stuck on that. Now I don't have to have the big traditional that's ginormous.
Yeah.
But I do want to have something around it.
What do you think about the old topic, a man of pride with a leather hide?
Well, I think that those are a really cool helmet,
Yeah.
and if I had one, I'd put it in a prominent place in my home or on a shelf. But I have tried to use one of those, and this big boy, when I get to looking up, crawling around in a fire, and it runs into my SCBA back there, my cylinder, it's annoying. And so I love the look of them, and if I could stand up every time I'm doing something, then it'd be great. But I can't always stand up. I have to crawl into tight spaces and do things that it's really hard to use that for.
Let's touch on, well, I want to ask this question before we finish the last topic here, but on technology, being a volunteer station, what does it look like for hand-me-down equipment?
Well, it's critical. The first gear that all of us had up until about 15 years ago were literally donated through INCOG or from other departments, and they were hand-me-downs that were expired before we ever got them. And those were critical. I mean, without those, we had nothing.
Yeah.
And so we slowly but surely were given a wildland gear that were hand-me-downs, and as we evolved, we were able to get purchase gear through grants, and also be able to purchase, wildland gear. But we were able to get purchase gear through grants, and also be able to purchase, wildland gear. But our PPE, our structural gear, are probably the single most important PPE and expensive PPE. Because right now, at the time of the stamping, I'm going to say a good set of structural gear you couldn't buy for less than $3,000.
Very true.
That's right there in the ballpark. But it's super critical. I wouldn't want anyone going into a house fire, any kind of a structure fire, without full PPE.
Something is better than nothing.
And then on top of that, you really need your SCBA and your air. So that's an additional cost. It's more expensive than the PPE, but or the structural gear. But we have had to make do with SCBAs that have been donated to us or given us. We've had to make do with structural gear that have been donated and given to us. And then we've had to hand down structural gear as they've been replaced. You've been here so many years, you're going to get a new set of gear. And we have to hand it down to guys that just show up to give them something to wear until they've kind of proven they're going to be here a while. And then we look at getting them a set of gear. And so the hand-me-down in fire apparatus as well as PPE is critical for so many volunteer fire departments.
Very much so.
Absolutely critical. And even though some of them may be expired, some of them are maybe not in the greatest shape, it's something to train in, it's something to practice in, to prepare someone for when they get their set of gear.
Absolutely. And on the last topic, we want to talk about improved communication. So I assume, because my ex-father-in-law did, and he's right around the same time probably you started out in fire. Did you start out with a pager?
I started out with a voice pager.
Voice pager.
One of the little squawk boxes.
Yep.
And it would come out and tell us, they would record a message, and it would come out, and every time you push the button, you could hear the message all over again. And you would get addresses sometimes. Sometimes you get landmarks. And typically you would get maybe what was going on. Grass fire, at the corner of 113th where the broken tree has, or across from this farm or that farm, or so-and-so's house. And it would come across, and you could, like I say, you could punch the button and hear the message again, but it would sound tones, and then you hear that message. And it was kind of a neat deal. It worked. It was a little awkward if you were in a crowd or at a church or something like that, and it suddenly started making all this noise, and then the announcement came across. But after that, we had pagers for a little while. And then as more and more people are carrying cell phones. Now we actually get paid through our cell phones. Mm-hmm. And that's been handier because they've been able to marry with some of these apps, you know, the mapping mm-hmm. and some of the other information. So it allows for a lot more information accurately. Mm-hmm. So that has really been a huge boon to what we do. Oh. And to touch on communication, and this is a phrase I coined a long time ago, or a statement, good communication is golden. Mm-hmm. Because it's really rare, but it is valuable once you find it. And so, whether it be on the radio or one-on-one, mm-hmm. getting your point across without a lot of words you don't need mm-hmm. is critical on a fire scene. It is absolutely critical that you're able to say something clear, mm-hmm. concise, know the lingo, know what you mean, and be able to relay that to someone. And then in turn, they need to repeat that back to you so that they have shown that they understand what you were telling them, and this is what they need to do. And I think a lot of times, not just in the fire service, but in life, we say a lot of things, but we're not really saying a lot. There's a lot of words coming out, but we're really not getting to the purpose or the heart of what we're after. Mm-hmm. And so communication is absolutely critical in all aspects of life.
There's people that believe in different things. Do you believe that everybody should know the same information, or the information should be a need-to-know basis?
I am a really big fan of having everyone understanding from the ground up. I will oftentimes teach instant command to people who are 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in. You know, one of your first introductions is always going to be understanding some of the basics of instant command. It may not be the full structured class, but I'm going to set you down and we're going to go over that because I want you to understand the dynamic of the entire scene mm-hmm. and that your aspect, it's important for you to do your part. But it is just one piece of a puzzle that is a much larger puzzle. And this is why these other people are doing their job. And this is why you have to do this job. Mm-hmm. And at this point, this is where your training is, but you need to understand what all these pieces are for. Mm-hmm. And that helps people reach an objective. You know, I think it's kind of a common misconception, you know, just do what I say do. Mm-hmm. That it means, you know, just do that, don't worry about, I want you to understand why you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Because that way when you get there and it's not what we thought, mm-hmm. you can communicate to me in a positive way what you see mm-hmm. and what is different. We can't attain that objective that you're looking for because this doesn't exist. Here's what we have. Now we go back and we evolve because we communicated clearly. We can change our plan of attack mm-hmm. based on that. That's like I touched on the accident earlier. Mm-hmm. You know, we may not realize that there's traffic coming over a hill when we first take off mm-hmm. to go over there. And then when we get there, suddenly we realize, hey, we're just over the crest of a hill. This is really dangerous. Mm-hmm. That has to evolve. I want you, if you're your first weekend and I'm telling you to do traffic control, you need to understand that.
That's not to pick on you. That's to get you to learn traffic control.
You need to understand that. That's part of where you're at. But I want you to understand that you are supporting the medics that are up there working on a patient and the firefighters that are trying to take a patient out of a vehicle or extrication or whatever, putting out that fire, whatever it is they're doing, by slowing down the traffic and controlling the traffic, you are supporting them mm-hmm. and you're keeping them safe. Not any less important than this job. Mm-hmm. But I want you to understand that job, but I want you to understand why that job's important, because these people are doing this, these people are doing that.
Every person has a job, and every job is just as important as the next.
Yeah.
Water supply is an important job. Stretching hose is an important job. Running the pump is an important job. Getting tools is an important job. Setting up ladders is an important job. Making fire entry, regardless, that's what everybody wants to do, is be on the nozzle. but nobody understands the 10, 12 steps it takes to get to the nozzle.
Yeah. Typically with our department, the first, maybe even the first year, depending on the situation, but typically just the first little bit, you're going to be part of the water supply. Because out here where we don't have hydrants on every corner, setting up tankers and setting up a water supply is critical.
Well, let me plant a seed in your mind here for just that instance, right? If you were put on the nozzle first time, every time, right? And you get inside and you have an issue with water supply, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to immediately jump to, why don't I have water? Rather than, hey, do we have a hydrant hooked up? Mm-hmm. If you understood how water supply works, instead of going, I don't have water, I don't know why I don't have water, you can, hey, are we dealing with a pressure issue? Do we need to back out because or do we have water supply?
Well, hopefully our incident command is organizing all that.
Oh, yeah.
Just so we don't.
But how many times have we been on scene where it's not perfect? We think that, incident command should be there and doing your job, and most of the time they are. But what happens if they're busy doing something else, like, in the first 5 minutes of a working fire, getting 4 of the people lined out to get their job done?
Well, we're constantly have to remind each other what's going on. And so the establishing a water supply for us out here for a structure is pretty critical. And so the hope is that you don't go in until a good water supply is established.
But what if you had water supply go in and you have an issue? Right. And then somebody who's unexperienced and hasn't done water supply before goes, why don't I have water?
Well, that's another good reason why someone who's inexperienced doesn't need to be inside yet.
100%.
That is part of the coaching and mentoring that we lead up to that. And to understand the water supply and to understand why we're not going to go until we have a water supply. Now, our engine carries 1,500 gallons of water. So we can get an attack and we can establish a really good attack that's going to involve 1,500 gallons of water, which you can, if you're judicious with how you spray your water, you can make that last a while. Once you find the seat of the fire, 1,500 gallons of water can do you a lot of good. But we still want to make sure we attach something to that that's going to supply water to it.
Very true.
And that's something that you will also learn as being part of the supply, water supply. You're going to hear this. You're going to hear the communication. You're going to understand IC. You're going to know what the engine's doing. And we'll probably hear the attack team, so they're learning why they're on scene. But that's why they're held back when they start at the water. They'll go to the engine and then they'll move to the nozzle. And because we are a volunteer department, means they don't know if they're going to be driving the truck, pumping the truck, on the nozzle or water supply, because it could change at every call. And so we do try to prepare them as much as possible, but we hold back the new guys to learn the process as it comes through.
I just don't want anybody considering joining the volunteer service to get discouraged because they get that lesser job. Like, oh, hey, you're going to be with water supply that may be a mile away from the fire. You're going to be manning this hydrant. You're not going to see any fire. You're not going to see any action. You're going to see a tanker come up. You're going to put water in that tanker and you're going to shut the hydrant off and let them go back to the job. You're not going to see a working structure fire. You may not. You may work traffic control and not be up on the wreck and getting to see all the plastic and metal and jaws of life being used because you're busy doing something else. But you're learning to do those things so that way when you become saltier, and that's not a bad term. Some people think being salty is a bad term. It just means you're experienced. Old salt, right? When you start getting saltier, you can then teach the guy who came in after you going, hey man, don't worry about it. Traffic control isn't that bad. Learn how to do traffic, and then you're going to move up and do some of the cooler stuff later. And one of the best things I like hearing, obviously it's not real good for the family whose house is burning, but as a volunteer service, when sometimes, again, call notes can be deranged. A passerby says, oh, I think there's smoke in the house, right? And you're going down this back end road, and I saw a video about it today, and I just was like, you know what, that is a good feeling. When you're going there, and all of a sudden, captain from the front seat goes, mask up, it's a ripper. And you're like, let's get to work,
Well, there's a rush, and, we train, it's not any different from a soldier training for war. Nobody wants to be in that situation. You know, we don't want someone to lose their home.
Oh, no,
we don't
absolutely.
want a loved one to be harmed.
But if it is on fire, we want to be the ones there.
Yeah, we didn't set the fire, but we have trained to put it out.
Absolutely.
And we are eager to use our training to help our community. And that's the key. Whether it be a car wreck or a house fire or a grass fire, you know, which we've had a ton of lately, a medical, you know, we train for these things and we are eager to step in there and help. That's what we do. So getting to use our skills is just a huge benefit.
I've even had the person who thought the worst of worst is happening, like something bad's really happening, right? We get there and then it's a false call. Nothing's happening, right? I'm so sorry we bothered you guys. We're so sorry. And it's like, no, you don't understand. I'm here, suited up, ready to go.
Yeah.
But I would much rather there be nothing wrong with your house than to actually have to work. I mean, I'm going to work if I need to. I'm trained to work and I'm going to do it, right?
It's a good day when we don't have to.
It's a good day when we don't have to work. Exactly. You know, and when it comes to back to like training and the final part of communication topic, you know, when we talk about communication and being on the same topic, everybody really needs to be on the same page, right? We've brought, and this is the last thing, promise, we'll get you out of here.
You're fine.
I heard a topic a long time ago, and it went something like this. The old generation was told, jump, and they said, yes, sir, how high, right? And they would jump, right? Nowadays, you get into a group of people, they say, jump, they say, why? And it's to shed light on that. There's two different kinds of people when it comes to that. Why, as in, why should I do that, right? And then there's another group, and I think I fall into this one. It's, I'm asking why because I want to understand everything that's going on, but I never said I wasn't going to do it.
Right. Well, I think that you can look at that in a couple ways. You know, in the fire service, I look at the training aspect that we have. It's more like I'm training you to follow me or to trust me. So when I communicate to you, I typically, if I'm giving you an order on what to do, I'm explaining an objective along with it.
Would you rather have somebody just say yes sir, how high, or would you rather have somebody that says why?
Well, here's how that works for me. If you have a legitimate question about a logistical, you know, how am I going to do that? How's that going to be achieved? You know, is it safe for me, or I don't feel like it's safe, then you have absolutely touched on something you need to touch on. If it's argumentative and just you're trying to be contrary, then that's not helpful and that's not productive. But that's also why I really strongly feel like, you know, you need to explain our objective. I need you to go in the house and turn right and look at that. We think the seat of the fire is inside to the right into the kitchen. I need you to go in there and darken that down. Well, now you understand your objective. So if you go into the house and the fire isn't to the right, it's to the left, we've got bad information. You can relay that back to me, and the plan evolves, and you're spraying to the left because you understand the objective. So you see the fire to the left. Now you know that that's the direction you're going to spray. You're going to darken it down because we're going to chase the fire back to where it came from, ideally. And so understanding the objective helps the communication make sense to you, and therefore you're going to do a better job for me.
Well, very true. And on an emergency scene, we don't really have time to explain why, right? But what you should be able to do is set aside your personal differences of why you think he's being mean to you and he's telling you just to do something, right?
Right.
I've evolved over the past 4 years into a mixture of yes, sir, how high, and why, right? So when you say jump, I'm like, yes, sir, and how do you want this done? And doing it, right? Even if I don't quite understand why I'm doing it. And then after everything's said and done, we're back here rehabbing everything like that, right? Go back like, sir, I followed your order because that's what you wanted me to do, but I don't really understand why I was doing that.
Yeah, I've had that actually happen about 3 times that I can think of out of the top of my head, where I've just said, just go do this, and I'll explain it later. Go grab this piece of equipment and get it here, and I'll explain it to you later. And the debriefing is critical, and explaining can be critical. Sometimes something is really critical to know in the next 10 seconds. You know, I had a situation where I needed to know where a guy's location was as he was coming to a scene. I needed to know absolutely what his ETA was. And he was arguing with me a little bit, and I had the explanation of, listen, I don't need the extra, I just need to know exactly in minutes how long it's going to be till you get here. And then I had to ask the other person, because what it was is, I was going to meet them. I didn't know if I needed to wait for him or have him go directly to a scene. And I was going to relieve a guy who had his kids with him. My wife was with me, we were going to watch the kids, and the three of us were going to go take care of that. I wanted to know the best place to intersect. And I just said, no, this is what I need to know, and I need to know now. And then I explained it to him as we came back and as we debriefed from the call. That's a real rare occurrence that you just need to do that. But I still say that the training and the trust you build prior to that situation is going to go a long ways to them understanding your objective.
Absolutely.
As well as understanding you, that if you say with a sense of urgency, you trust me enough to know this is what I'm going to do.
And I think there's a sense of urgency, like you just said, that goes along with something like, hey, I need you to find firefighter Gage, right? And instead of you going, why? You can say, hey, I need you to find firefighter Gage. He hasn't checked in 15 minutes. I need to make sure he's not down, right? Now I've got this sense of urgency going, oh, and I go and do it, right? Instead of going, okay, I guess I'm gonna go find firefighter Gage, and for some reason Captain wants me to go find him. And it's like, now there's no sense of urgency. Like I wasn't explained to why.
Yeah,
right?
he could have a tool I want, or he could just be wandering around somewhere for all you know. But yeah, understanding your orders really goes a long ways to helping us achieve an objective.
Absolutely.
Not just to send you to a corner, you need to know why you're going to that corner and what you're looking for.
In some cases. I wouldn't say every single time. But
if it's relevant, it needs to be shared.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I think we had a really productive conversation here. We touched on a lot of topics. We talked about firefighter, retention, big part of it. But we also talked to these people get into it and they want to do this job. When now we have this retention, why do we want to retain them? Why is it important?
Well, I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're good.
The way it's working right now, on average, for every 10 guys that we bring in and we train, probably one of them will be 7-8 years, maybe. One out of every 20 will last 20 years, maybe. And maybe one or two out of every 20 will go on and be a full-time either firefighter or medic somewhere else. We're trying to retain them, and we're bringing them in. The simple truth of it is it is a very complicated task. We want everyone to come in and get their 20 years in and get their retirement, or do 25 years and get their retirement. That's our goal, because consistency and getting a rapport with your team is huge. It's huge because you don't have those communication problems you were asking about earlier, because And so having a team in here that knows each other and is trained is safer for us, safer for the community. But that being said, we've got a lot of people that use this as a training ground. If we get 3-4 years out of them, maybe even 5 years, they're going on to something else. The 7-year mark seems to be a real difficult one to pass. We've had a handful go to 15 and kind of say this is it. And then we've got 4 of us that are 20 years in now, 20 years right at or slightly over. And we really need to keep growing our numbers because the need is there. The need is critical. We need firefighters. We need medics.
Absolutely.
And if anybody out there is even thinking about it, come out and talk. And if you're not in our area, find a volunteer fire department close to you. Just go talk to the guys. Just go see what they think. Everyone's in need of good help.
And if you're not sure where your volunteer fire station is, it's as simple as calling your city municipal fire station that's close to you. For me, I called Owasso, and Owasso said, nope, we don't do volunteer work, but you might try Limestone. And that's what got me into fire, was because they told me where my closest volunteer station was. So, volunteering is very rewarding in and of itself. It's not for everybody, but for those that can hack it and want to do a good job and not get paid. And a lot of people might say, well, I don't want to do nothing and not get paid. Trust me, when you do something and a citizen says, thank you, without you, I don't know what I would have done, that is payment enough.
I can also tell you that just because you're doing it as a volunteer, doing it for free, doesn't mean you can't act professional.
Oh, yeah.
Professionalism is key. It is something we strive for constantly. So,
100%. All day, every day. Scot Smith, thank you for joining the Fat Firefighter Podcast. Glad to have you on. I'm glad we could make the episode work and have you come in and share your experiences. We have a vast amount of knowledge from you. Firefighter retention and all the things we touched on today are just one of the very, very many topics that you know. I would love to have you on again and talk about tools or just anything in general. But this is a good podcast, and I appreciate the information, and whether it gets to the masses or it doesn't, I know one day I'm going to look back at this, my kids will look back at this and go, hey, I can learn something from this. And if it helps one person, just like I do for anything in my life, especially firefighting, if I can help just one person, it's worth it.
glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Corey.